women in Canada are now considered equal to men. We have the right to vote and are paid the same wages. Women are also considered persons, which is more than could be said 100 years ago. So how did women get considered persons? How did we get the right to vote? How did women go from staying home all day to being able to do any job imaginable? Well, the answers lie with some of the most famous women's suffragettes and activists for women's rights. Dr. Emily Howard Stowe was the first female to practice medicine in Canada. She was one of the first 2 women to attend the Toronto School of Medicine. She made it possible for women like herself to be trained as doctors and to practice medicine legally in Canada. The famous 5 were Emily Murphy, Louise McKinley, Nellie McClung, Harriet Murr Edwards, and Irene Parlby. The Supreme Court originally ruled that women were not persons, but when these 5 women contacted the British court, women were now considered persons in Canada. A statue of them stands in Ottawa as a reminder of this event. Kim Campbell was the first and only woman to be Prime Minister of Canada. She lasted 5 months in office and proved that women could be in positions of political power. These 3 women proved to Canada that you didn't have to be a man to be successful. They paved a path for other driven women to follow in their footsteps. Let's now go on a journey to see the history of Canadian women's rights. Canada's first school for girls opens in Quebec. It is run by nuns. The first wave of feminism hits Canada, mostly about allowing women to have a greater role in public life. Women get the right to vote in Canada's first province, Manitoba, followed by Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC, Ontario, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, and finally Quebec. Agnes MacPhail becomes the first woman elected to the House of Commons. The first Olympic Games that women are allowed to compete in. Both Ethel Canterwood and the Canadian women's track team take gold medals. Thanks to the famous 5, women are finally considered persons in Canada. Women want to keep doing the jobs that they were doing during World War II. They are reluctant to go back to housework and just simply being a wife. Charlotte Whitten becomes the first female mayor in Canada. She is mayor of Ottawa for 14 years. The federal government's Royal Commission on the Status of Women made 167 recommendations for greater equality of women. A new feminist movement starts. It is known as Sisterhood is Powerful. The National Action Committee on the Status of Women is the largest organization of women's groups in Canada. It is committed to ensuring equality for women. The National Union of Students Canada is formed. It raised issues of sexism, violence against women, child daycare, and other things. The Murdoch farm case shocked Canadians when an Alberta farm wife was denied half of her farm that she had built up with her husband over 25 years. Her work was simply seen as fulfillment of wifely duties. This demonstrated sexism and how the unfairness of family law. The Canadian Human Rights Act is passed. This gave basic rights to all Canadians, no matter what their sex, race, or religion. There is an increase in women's writing, covering topics that were previously private or hidden, for example, family violence or rape. Bertha Wilson is the first woman appointed to the Supreme Court of Canada. The Royal Commission for Equality in Employment is formed. Women are now supposed to receive equal pay for equal work. The Supreme Court voted to strike down Canada's abortion law. There has been no law since then. This is one of the most controversial topics in the women's movement. Women are now allowed to serve in the Canadian Armed Forces. Rita Johnson becomes the first female premier in Canada. She runs BC for almost 3 months. So Canadian women are treated equal to men now, or at least they're supposed to be. Are women actually paid the same? Do all men consider them equals? Sadly, the answer is no and no. The Canadian government claims that women are treated equal to men in Canada. There are laws in place to prevent discrimination towards women. The Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women is a group that tries to enforce women's rights laws all around the world. They help to examine cases of women discrimination in Canada. They help a lot, and things have gotten better, but it is impossible to stop the discrimination completely. In 2000, Canada also introduced a campaign called Equal Pay for Equal Work. This act assures that both genders are paid equally for doing the same job. Aboriginal women are one of the most targeted groups for physical and sexual abuse. CBC states that the RCMP has not solved 230 cases of Aboriginal women who have been murdered or gone missing. These cases date back to 1951. They may have been impossible to solve, but many Canadians believe that they were not properly investigated because the victims were all women or girls. This feeling is only elevated by the fact that there have been multiple reports of RCMP officers abusing women themselves. Prisoners have been both physically and verbally abused by officers in the past. Even women who are employed by the RCMP are having issues. There have been almost 1,000 complaints of sexual abuse in the RCMP. The most important thing is that the RCMP and other organizations have started to respond to complaints of abuse. New laws are being put in place to prevent this abuse from continuing. Okay, so let's move away from all this depression and talk about happier things. In 2012, Canada ranked first for women's rights out of all the G20 countries. Woo! In Canada, there's universal health care for safe reproduction. Girls and boys go to school in equal numbers. There are laws against abuse to women. Women can vote. Women can run the country, the provinces, and our cities and towns. Women are persons too.